What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Bruce and Josh Show. This week, we're going to be talking about the state of the real estate market in 2023.
So the number one thing I would say about the current market is that the news has made everybody, or has put the message out there that it's all doom and gloom.
As they do.
And that nothing is selling, and that it's all horrid for buyers now because interest rates are so ungodly high. When all of that is not true, and the reason they do it, of course, is because nobody listens to positive news. Only negative news sells and gets eyeballs and makes money.
Positivity does not sell.
Correct. So just know that what's happened is we had ridiculously low interest rates for several years.
Historically low interest rates.
Like
they have never been that low.
Correct.
In the history of ever. In
Correct.
the history of interest rates.
So 2.5% to 3.5% interest rate is not sustainable over time because it does exactly what happened. It means that 10, 20 people are going to be bidding on each house because they're almost free at that kind of rate. And so
you can't have free money forever.
Correct.
It's just not feasible.
So it was causing the prices to ramp up so quickly, and for buyers to have to overbid houses 50, 100 grand, have to pay all the closing costs, have to have no negotiation power. So what we've seen...
A correction was quickly needed because the prices of houses were quickly getting overinflated.
Well, and maybe not so much even overinflated, although I think that's not a bad term, but unaffordable to the average person. So especially in an area like Pensacola where the average incomes, are 60, 70,000 a year for a household income on average, you can't start having your average price point be 400 plus thousand because the average person can't afford it. So we were quickly driving this market to a place of unaffordability, which was going to definitely cause a market problem, a market shift. So the fact that the Fed has raised the rates to curb inflation and getting the rates for 30-year fixed mortgages back to a more average or normal type rate, right now 5.5 on a 15-year, 6.5 or so on a 30-year, has caused the market to go back to a more normal level as still what is a solid seller market, but just a more normal level of sales.
Bruce, I think at an event the other night, you said that in your 30-year career, the average of interest rates somewhere in the mid-8s.
Yeah, 8.75 is the history I've got over my 33-year career. So right now, they're still more than 2 points less than what the average has been over my career.
Yeah.
So not a bad rate at this point. Really, the only negative at this point is that interest rates are back to a more normal level. Everything else at this point really is a positive on the buyer side. And that doesn't mean everything's negative on the seller side either, because we're not seeing prices slip. So for sellers, the price levels are still up because of the last couple of years increase. They're up at a point that they would not have been prior to that. So for the positive for the seller is prices are still solid. But the positives for the buyers that definitely offset the interest rate is that you're not having to pay over list price anymore.
You're able to come in and do things like negotiate and get more favorable terms. Whereas in the past, you were just having to come in and overbid, take on seller side closing costs just to win bids, and not have any leverage in the transaction.
And now the average buyer is able to purchase below list price, able to ask the seller to contribute toward their closing cost, and even more importantly, get the seller to contribute toward buying down the interest rate. So that you either end up with the lower rate for the first couple of years, or even, depending on how you want to play it out, a lower rate for the entire length of your mortgage.
And on the seller side of things, things are still moving at a great rate. So we've gone from houses selling in, less than a day to houses are now sitting on the market for a more normal period of time.
Actually, less than normal at this point.
Yeah.
30
days, which, it's the average right now, which is still a very good amount of time. Whereas, in a more equilibrium normal market, it was around 60 to 120 days.
And again, just like that interest rate being at 8.75%, the average over my 33-year career, the average days on market over my career has been somewhere between that 75 to 120 days. Mm-hmm. So we're still way below average in terms of the days on market. So unlike what the media would have you believe, it is actually a very solid and strong market in terms of both buyers and sellers. Buyers having more leverage again to get some things out of the transaction. Sellers still being able to sell the house in a very reasonable amount of time for a very solid price.
Thinking about you made me lose my mind. I'm so crazy.